Hello, everyone. My name is James Griffin. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a research data infrastructure developer within the Princeton University Library. And my lightning talk today is going to address the topic of ActiveFedora, Rails, and linked data. So in order to try and address this succinctly, I wanted to first provide an overview of linked data and the resource description framework. So to provide everything in context, linked data is basically a very broad subject. There are entire conferences dedicated to this topic, but essentially what linked data tries to achieve is it tries to provide a model for, or a paradigm for ensuring that elements of data sets and elements of sets of metadata, so fields and attribute values, can be assigned sort of URLs for these actual data elements, URIs, Uniform Resource Identifiers. These are comparable to URLs, but they don't actually point to locations on the World Wide Web, which are normally resolved using the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP.
James, can
yes.
I just interrupt for a second? Some folks are saying that it's hard to hear you. I can hear you fine, but I've got some headphones on. If you have any way that you can pull a mic closer, I think that might be.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me see here. I raise my volume. Okay, hopefully I'm more audible now. I apologize.
Thanks, James.
You're welcome. Sorry again. Yes, so linked data and the RDF basically seek to achieve using these URIs to express, to give unique identifiers to elements of data sets, as well as to provide URIs for encoding the relationships between different data sets. So a very common practice one would find would be, say, there's a URI for a collection in the abstract, say like a collection digital object, and then there's a URI for each member of a collection, say, 3 different book objects. And there will also be a URI encoding the collection membership relationship. So basically, you're just constructing a network of different interrelated data points that use these URIs to build what are essentially knowledge graphs, undirected acyclic knowledge graphs, which can then be queried and updated in much the same manner that one would use relational databases. And the specific technology specification that could be used to implement linked data that is used within the Samvera stack is known as the Resource Description Framework, or RDF. And I link to the World Wide Web Consortium and their specification in the slides. So from the standpoint, how this is relevant to Samvera is that essentially there's always been a traditional approach to use a project known as Fedora Commons for data persistence within Samvera repository architectures. So essentially, Fedora persists and publishes digital object metadata using this RDF standard, this resource description framework. And from Fedora 4 onwards, which I believe those date to 2018, the Fedora 4 releases implement a standard called a linked data platform, which basically just really further couples the usage of linked data and this Fedora Commons repository project. It should be noted from the standpoint of providing some sort of timeline and basic context that Samvera really originally used Fedora 3 releases, the latest of which was Fedora 3.8.1. Community support ended for that in January 3rd of 2019. And while Samvera repositories typically use Fedora 4 releases, the latest of which was 4.7.5, there's later releases of Fedora Commons 5.1.1 and 6.2.0 are the latest in the series of community releases that one will find. And I would encourage anyone who happens to have any specific questions regarding linked data platforms and the specific technologies underlying Fedora Commons to please seek out persons in the Fedora Commons community. Everything is an open source and project within that organization, and they are extremely helpful contributors, and they're always looking to try and engage with those who are using Fedora software projects. So how this integrates into the actual Samvera repository stack is that basically Samvera, as developers and contributors and interested parties are aware, is really built heavily upon the Ruby on Rails framework. So in order to work with this RDF technology, one really needs to work with an RDF client, which has been implemented in the Ruby software language. And this is where there's a cascade or stack of interdependent gems which support RDF persistence. Firstly, there is this RDF gem, which is maintained outside of the Samvera community. It has an entire dedicated GitHub organization, Ruby RDF, and they publish releases to the RDF gem quite frequently. They are very active, but the contributors are quite small. I wouldn't say that it is a very large community, but they are very engaged. And again, everything is released in such a manner as to welcome contributions and try to promote engagement with their own projects. So RDF itself is actually consumed downstream by a number of different gems that are maintained by the Samvera community. The first of these three are LDP, which requires RDF as a dependency. Active Triples, another gem which requires RDF as a dependency, and this gem ActiveFedora, which requires both as dependencies, but really forms the core suite of functionality that is really essential to tying together support for RDF persistence and Rails applications. So here, just to provide a bit more detail, basically RDF can be used to kind of work with in-memory graph parsing of URIs and just modification of these knowledge graphs within the Ruby language. I am not in any way advocating for resourcing the community to maintain this gem. LDP, on the other hand, is used basically as a sort of a low-level client for interfacing with Fedora Commons or Fedora Commons replacements that adhere to this linked data publishing platform standard. I'm humbly suggesting that perhaps this may be superseded by something that's maintained outside of the community, given that it's going to really tether us to looking to kind of work exclusively with Fedora Commons. Active Triples is really providing a level of Rails integration for publishing active record or active model attributes as RDF statements. This is really necessary for maintaining ActiveFedora, and for those who are familiar with active record, it's basically kind of provides kind of a certain level of seamless integration so that Rails developers who are comfortable working with active record can work with this readily. And ActiveFedora is really fundamental to ensuring that associations or querying or caching are really supported at the level of Rails, much like one finds with really with active record and other active model adapters. Valkyrie, for those who are familiar with this project, it provides an alternative, but the labors for integrating this into the hierarchy stack are still fairly new. So just to qualify a lot of my questions that I've raised so far, and really some of the concerns which I am to some extent voicing, I want to emphasize that I am extremely grateful and indebted to all members of the Samvera community who have authored, contributed, and maintained these core gems. Thank you to everyone. It's really, really fundamental to really to the growth and establishment of Samvera as a repository architecture that can be readily used. However, in order to advance a lot of community efforts over the past number of years from 2019 onwards, it's really important to, I think, engage with the community and contributors in the community, many of whom who have shifted their focus to other projects, what exactly can be done to maintain a number of these gems, and seeing about whether or not it's going to be desirable to continue maintaining these gems as they're currently structured. The first question I have, and really the concern I have, is whether or not some of these dependencies should remain decoupled. Is it possible to maybe avoid kind of, excluding, or sorry, segregating LDP and active triples and ActiveFedora from one another? Might it be more readily useful to try and maintain LDP and active triples within ActiveFedora? This is an approach that's seen within some of the Hydra core and Hydra head gems. So there have been successes in deduplication there, and perhaps consolidation is going to be helpful. Further, might there be any strong community interest in using RDF following Valkyrie as integration into Hyrax? Would this be for persistence? Perhaps there's less interest in persistence if Valkyrie uses persistence backend, such as PostgreSQL, which doesn't rely upon the RDF, and maybe querying is where RDF support should be offered. And regarding tracking, the activity of Ruby RDF contributors outside of the community, I would strongly contend that engagement should be active with this community of contributors. However, we should not be looking to try and allocate developer time for this. Perhaps even just a small interest group, just to track our releases of Ruby RDF or get a sense for where they would like to take their project in the future might be helpful. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time and attention. Please, all feedback, questions, and definitely criticisms are quite welcome. I can be reached on Slack using my alias, or by email, jrg5@princeton.edu.